Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode, a special episode of Coming Together, a project where we talk about and explore various issues of social cohesion. I think this episode is a special one because it's a bonus episode, and we will be talking with a guest today, and I'll start with introductions in a bit. With me here, we have Shanbang, who is a photographer and co-collaborator for this social project. So, Shanbang, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
And of course, we have our guest, Maria Isaeva, who is an art director currently based out of Bangkok, but who has been living in Singapore for close to 2 decades until recently. Maria, great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Right. So let's get to the crux of it. So Maria, as you know, and as we've been, corresponding over emails and chats, a lot of our conversations as part of this project has been about understanding various social issues vis-a-vis cultural integration, and of course, the local and foreigner divide that we see often. And I think having you here is super interesting because I've read about you before, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we talk about that.
I mean, I don't know what you read about me, but hopefully it's interesting. Well, I was lucky to grow up in Singapore since I was 12 years old, and I went to all the local schools. And then my first job was in Singapore as well. I mean, all the stuff in between, it's called life, and we're just trying not to die most of our life, and people are just looking to reproduce, but everything else in between is life, growing up and finding a job and going to the dentist. So very grateful for that. It's been interesting because only when I grew up a little, I think after 25 or something, I started thinking about really where I belong to, and not just leaving Singapore that made me question that, but I've constantly been questioning that. And like Pico Iyer has said, home is not a piece of soil, it's a piece of soul, which is what kept me very long in Singapore because my friends and connections are there. My family friends, I call them family.
Well said, Maria. For those who are listening, for context, Maria Isaeva was subject of an article by Rice Media sometime in May this year, where the article talks about, having lived in Singapore for so long and, for various reasons she had to leave. So it comes at an interesting time when, because of the pandemic and perhaps before that, there has been a long brewing conversation about immigration in general, and also about identity. And I think the article, where you were featured, Maria, I think captures that really well in the sense, what is identity in the sense, you pointed out earlier that, home is a piece of soul. And while that in spirit is what it's about, oftentimes it is very much tied to, the country you were born in and stuff. And could you tell us a little bit more about how you navigated that?
Well, I think that a huge part of my life, almost 20 years, I've been building a lot of meaningful relationships and friendships, and as well as work was big part of my life because we work long hours, and they are like my second family. And I think now I'm actually trying to gravitate more towards the idea of home being a pair of my shoes because of where I am and how I've never been able to have roots anywhere. And the only thing that the roots that I have are just, I'm walking around with these memories and I'm walking around with the connections, and I'm very grateful for them. Of course, Singapore has shaped me. I am who I am because of her. And lately I'm thinking that actually where I belong and integration is actually more about who you are, where you're from is about who you are as a person, what's inside of you, meaning even it could be, I started questioning my stomach, like spicy food. So maybe my stomach is from Thailand. My soul and spirit, or the way I think and the way I work is from Singapore because I've been surrounded in these environments. And maybe my zen or my peace is somewhere in Japan because I also used to live there for a while, you know. So actually, even if you ask a question, what makes a Singaporean, or it's hard to answer, right? And it's more about what kind of traits do you have that make you feel belong. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did, and you did well. So it's an interesting question and answer, Maria, because it's a question that I often try to understand. Also, for context, I have been living in Singapore for 10 years, and while I do consider Singapore home, and just like you said, I made friends here, I found love here, I found purpose here. And so, by those metrics, I would definitely consider Singapore home. But I think there is also a larger conversation about who gets to say that they've integrated, especially in recent times. There seems to be certain metrics that society uses to judge whether someone deserves to call, this island home. So I'm still struggling with it. I don't understand it yet. I try to have many conversations with a lot of my friends, both local and foreign, and I'm not sure we have any answers yet. Shanbang, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, really, what makes someone Singaporean is tricky because I would say most people would go towards food, because it's easy, it's something identifiable. But then when you go really deeper, or like they could say culture or multiracial society, but that's not really something that is strictly just Singapore has. Plenty of other countries has it. So if you really dive deep into Singapore, I think it's very difficult to find something that is uniquely ours.
Well, no, that's a good point, Shenbang. And of course, look, of the three of us here, I'm the one who has lived here the shortest. So, Maria, you lived here for a much longer time. Like, what was Singapore like back then? Were these conversations that you had when you started living here? Questions about identity.
Actually, I think food is actually, I do think food can be a very big part of culture. I feel that food connects you on a DNA level because you share the same meal, and as you eat it during at the same time, you're consuming these things, right? And it becomes part of your DNA, the conversations. I do believe there is a scientific explanation behind, people sharing the same ideas, people who eat the same food. Um, there is a very interesting way to talk about food, but I think like growing up, it was very different because I think Singapore is changing very rapidly, and maybe that is why it's so hard to put a finger on like what makes a Singaporean. There are some things that stayed the same, but there are some things that I saw changing, and I like the change that I see, and that's awesome. But I mean, when I was growing up in schools, it was really hard for me to find friends. People would they wouldn't be, this is again like I always wondered if integration is actually a one-way street because you try and you try, but it may not be reciprocal, or you may not, you're still like like a black sheep, you are not really being received the way you want to be seen, and you have to explain yourself a lot. And that is where the cultural exchange began, by making mistakes, by adapting, like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know I can't use my left hand, to eat my food, or these little things, is by making mistakes and really failing until you understand that this is different cultures. And that was a process that I came across when I was much younger. And then when I moved to, like, when I started looking for a job, and like there was been instances where I understand that um, there was like somebody who declined me in a creative industry a job because he said he did not know how the team would feel having an angmo on the team. And
Wow.
Whoa.
I tried not to judge, because Singapore has taught me to be open-minded and to understand that he also has interests of his team. He feels that maybe his team was not equipped having a foreigner, and they are not really sure have, I am not judging, because if I had someone that I didn't know very well or I didn't know much about them, maybe, it's, I'm just trying to see from his perspective why he said that, because that's kind of stuck with me. And there's things like that. And I had to integrate, I had to move on and, you know, find another way. And that's, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that story is a little.
No, I feel like more Singaporeans now are actually aware and educated in a way that they're questioning the right things, and they're like, "Sorry, could you repeat
Hmm.
that? Did you just really mean that?" They are making these shifts, especially in the art community. They are finding ways to question these things and to start conversations about, these are prejudice, um, judgmental things that we should be careful about saying. And even when I came to Singapore as a kid, I was dividing people by race. I did not know, because it's common from where I come from. We have a huge, like, we have 11 time zones, and people come from all over the world to live in Russia. So people would naturally say it. But then I realized that if you do not think twice about saying it in Singapore, people might get offended. You might not be, you need to be more sensitive, you need to be maneuver around. But I think now the positive change is I see people are questioning more and more. They're interrogating their moral compass is shifting
Hmm.
somewhere.
Absolutely. That's something that I've noticed too. I've often struggled with the constant racialization of everything. Everything always has like a race ascribed to it. For example, if I do something, there are enough people who say, "Oh, is it an Indian thing?" And I'm like, "Really? It's a person thing." But you are right, Maria. I think I am seeing a certain, shift in that kind of mentality, and that's pretty great. Although I have to say that since you were talking about, living in a pre-internet time, I suppose, the mid 2000s and stuff. Um, has what has been the largest shifts you've seen between now and then?
In terms of social,
Yeah, society outlook.
I think it's easier to start a conversation for with people to just have a casual talk. It's much easier to in the past, I tried to make a lot of friends, and I was a little weird in a way that I tried to add everyone on MSN Messenger, and I
Oh,
tried
okay,
to,
okay. That is
and it
classic.
became a little bit weird. I think
Okay.
people were like, "Why is she so overly friendly?" But I'm like, because I want to find out about your culture and what I want to brainstorm things, and they were like, "You're a little weird. Like, you added the whole class. You should not do that." And then now I see that people are showing into. They're asking like about culture. They're asking about, they're more interested in other people's roots, where they come from. And that is what I see. It's much easier to connect with people, much easier to discuss some things that were a gray area
Hmm.
without being weird.
Right. Wow. MSN. Those days take me back.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yes.
Okay,
When
that's an
when social
interesting
media
point.
was simpler back then.
Yeah. Or at least like limited. Yeah, no, that's fair. And but I dare say that social media has also helped with building such connections, right? For example, the three of us wouldn't be talking right now if it weren't for us,
Yeah, true, true.
having this. So no, that's
And
yeah. Sorry, go on.
no, no, I was.
Okay. So Maria, please stop me if this is an uncomfortable question, but in the Rice Media article, they talked about, the number of times that you've applied for permanent residency in Singapore, and you have been rejected a number of times, and last year was the final straw, if you will. Um, yeah, go on.
Yes, I've applied actually before leaving, before taking the job in Bangkok, and it was the 10th time. Although in my mind, I've already made like, I made my decision. It's time to open up my mind and just like see what there is and take the opportunity. I was rejected. My 10th time was rejected about 4 months ago, and yeah, it's the same letter, the same template. It doesn't say the reason. It just says, "We regret to inform you. If any of your documents change, please apply again," something like that. And yeah, there was no reason. It's really hard
Hmm.
to, they just don't give you the reason, right? It's, you can't find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty rough, Maria. And in fact, because of that Rice Media article, you have garnered a lot of sympathy. I think a lot of people were very, sympathetic. They recognized that, even after having lived here for so long and having kind of, immersed into local culture, you still haven't gotten a permanent residency, and it sucks. It's interesting that you mentioned that there's no not transparency. There's no reasons given, and I've tried to look at like whether reasons have been given at all. But as it turns out, it's a very opaque black box of sorts. So I mean, some say it's a draw of the lot, some say there are other reasons, but at this point, we don't really know.
Well, all it
Um,
takes is a whistleblower, right? Then people will know. Maybe there's like
yeah.
some internal like checklist for how people get accepted or not.
So there is one thing which was brought up in a recent podcast, and I pulled up the newsletter, the news article about this. So the minister Grace Fu did mention in 2013 that immigration criteria, is always about maintaining the racial balance here. So we know at least one reason, for whether immigration is considered. So there's definitely a sense of wanting to maintain that racial quota. And unfortunately, in Maria's case, I think she would come under that vague other category in CMIO. So, yeah, I guess the stakes are much smaller for them.
It could be, and what I find a little frustrating about the comments, like people that there's many people that send a lot of love and sympathy and I would say empathy. And there's people who told me that I should just get married. And I would really want to ask them, why don't you say that to your child?
Mm.
Why do you think that I should put my life like just simply like how are you adding value to marriage or are you devaluing it because of a place where I feel home? Because I don't feel that is a good reason and it should not be a joke. It's either a really
Mm.
bad joke or it's a really bad joke, asking someone to get married to, because yes, I know people do that, but you have to meet someone that you want to build with, and it's life, you can't force things. And there's also a lot of stigma with Russian women, I cannot say it's been easy for being like a Russian woman with a Russian passport where everyone constantly questions your intentions and agenda.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, are you trying to date my son because you want his passport? That kind of.
Whoa. That
Yikes.
I mean,
is
they don't ask you directly, but it's
yeah,
very subtle,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very subtle.
Actually, I find ironic because those people that would have said, "Why don't you just get married?" I would say, ironically, they would be the ones who actually would probably view marriage as like something important. They wouldn't just say like, "Hey, yeah, it's just because marriage of convenience is actually it's not exactly legal, right?" Because like the
Yeah, it's
government will send people to check on you
yeah,
to
yeah.
see if you are actually, like because people, I think I've heard or read about reports of people trying out with PTO, but they will try and make sure that, oh, you're not just getting married just to make sure you get your HDB flat, Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
Oh man,
Anecdotal, yeah,
I
evidence.
wow.
Yeah.
Maria, like, how do you respond to that? I mean, I'm just curious. Like,
Well, I just convert everything into humor, and I'm like, sure, only three more years, and then I'm going to find someone else. Like, what? Like, I just
oh gosh.
make it like a joke. I try to just swallow it, like that guy who told me that he doesn't know what the team will be, how the team will respond to an angmo. I just like, okay,
Yikes.
and then I'm gonna send more emails. So it's just a thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's Singapore, it's everywhere. It's unfortunately people think like that, and it's changing because I've been working since I was 16. I've been interning and working during my holidays in the same industry, right? Teaching art and doing like events, creative events, hosting and curating. Like, I've been working all my life. I never had to like, you know, go and look for a man to like marry and take care of me.
Mm.
And I do not know whether they have good intentions when they offer me to get married for citizenship.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one to untangle, right? Because on the one hand, perhaps it's born of good intentions, and it's probably from a time that they felt that it was an okay thing to do, but obviously times have changed and perhaps their mindsets haven't. And I think it's an interesting point that you mentioned, Maria, about, stereotyping and how people, stereotype, and I think we all do. In fact, I myself, tend to make decisions based on what I think is happening and stuff. We all tend to make patterns. That's very human of us. Um, and I guess it's, I don't know, like, would you say that like Singapore has been kind to you in terms of being stereotyped often?
I think Singapore has been awesome because people are very careful about, like, now I see it now more than when I was in school, because children, when they're young, they don't know how to conceal such things. They just ask you
Mm,
directly,
mm,
right? um, but when I was growing up, I think it became a lot more elegant, and also people were more interested in my culture. They wanted to find out more where I come from, or when they heard that I grew up here, they wanted to know what makes me me, how much Singaporean am I, and then I start speaking Singlish with them, and then yeah, I think when I was growing up, children are generally, they don't know how to conceal certain point of view. They're just asking you straight to your
Hmm.
face. And I cannot blame them. But I think today people are a lot more aware and open minded, and they ask me about my culture. They want to share experiences, they want to collaborate. They're like, even that's why I started doing some Russian projects, Russian related, and because I grew up here, I thought it was an interesting fusion, right? Um, I don't, the question was, you asked me, sir, what was the
It's
question? It
like,
was,
was it better then? Is it better now than then in terms of being stereotyped?
I think it's definitely better. It's definitely better, not just towards myself, but I see my friends and everyone else being treated better. But of course, there are areas that need more in-depth um, scrutiny. I think because my environment changed, right? So I think generally people are a lot more elegant in the way they communicate. So I don't experience any kind of bias or anything, except for that some parts, in the industry or something, like people would come to my desk and be like, "How do you get this job? Show me your portfolio."
Uh,
And like,
right.
I'm like, seriously? I went through like 7 interviews and and the HR, and you come to my desk and you ask me how I got the job. I mean, it's very subtle. It's very elegant and cunning. They do it, but it's everywhere. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. I cannot just pin it to Singapore.
Yeah, no, of course. I think that's something that we've been noticing all across the board, right? I think especially we're living in a time where like at least 40% of the population are considered mobile, right? The age group between 20 and 40. I think more countries have become multicultural, multi-ethnic. And I think these little issues are coming up because of it, right? And as you pointed out, Maria, it's not just Singapore. We're talking about countries like South Africa, Brazil, the US, Germany, Australia. And I think all of these issues are coming to the fore. I think we as humans, we are not capable of, or at least we struggle, to, um, how do I put this? Like look past stereotypes. And I think it's an active process that we constantly need to improve on. Um, wow, like I still can't get past that story that you said about your potential employer, wondering whether the team would be comfortable with having an Angmo in. It's hopefully that's a minority and an exception versus the norm. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't judge him now. I'm just thought about it, and it's like it's been 4 years now, and I guess I am happy and grateful for the people I worked with. So, everything just happens. The stars align where I need to be.
Hmm.
So I just don't think it made me feel uncomfortable. But again, like, there are many instances, where I had to, and I'm sure everyone else that's trying to integrate, you have to kind of put your head down and understand where the person is coming from. Maybe they don't mean anything mean. They just don't know how to manage a person that they've never dealt with before, because maybe their entire team is local. Um, One thing that I've learned in Singapore is, you cannot expect anything. If you move to a country, like when I was in Bangkok, for example, I used to like think, oh, no one at the bank speaks English, no one at the post office speaks English. And then I was like, why would I need to speak why would they need to speak English?
Hmm.
I am an immigrant. I'm in their country, and it's on my onus to take up the language and to figure it out. Because when they give you a queue number and they ask you to say it in Thai, they say it in Thai, you're like, I don't know what how to say 137 in Thai, so I'm like lost, in the queue. And that's I have to integrate. I have to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Thailand example is a good one because I think in most countries, language proficiency is a key part of integrating, right? We can talk about Thailand, we can talk about Germany, and this is like a big part of whether you can talk to locals or not. I feel like because in Singapore, English is, the lingua franca, I think the pressure to learn another language is lesser. And therefore, most people also do not even take that extra step to integrate because they're like, "Oh, it's easy." And I think we also have to recognize that I think a lot of foreigners living all across the world, I think there's often a lot of effort that has to be done on their part in order to understand the norms of society, and oftentimes most people can't do all of that. So I think that's where all of this divide comes into play. But it's also like I'm really struggling with this whole topic of integration because sometimes I see that there are people who have, lived here long enough, have contributed, but all it takes is some random incident to demonize them in a light. And in other times, all it takes is one TikTok video, and then everybody will scream, "One of us." I'm not sure if you guys have seen that recent TikTok of a Polish lady who was speaking Singlish, and within 30 seconds everybody was saying, "Oh, you're one of us," and stuff. So I find that social validation from online not indicative of whether someone is integrated or not. So it's just like, so what are the rules? I don't get it. So I don't know.
So you see, this is an interesting point you make because someone saw that and they accepted them because they saw a little piece of, people generally want to see themselves in other people.
Hmm.
So this is why I feel that integration is not a one-way street. Other people have to be receptive to new changes because let's say we talk about refugees. These people come with, they don't speak the language, they put their kids in school and they try to survive. Their priority is not high tier jobs or like a good climate. They literally need to survive in a new country, and everyone else around them is trying to give them a way to live, to help them. And it's, yes, refugees, I'm giving this as a very radical example, but I'm just saying that it's just my opinion that it could work both ways as well.
I'm not sure anymore. The last 2 years have shown, a surge in xenophobia, nationalism, not just in Singapore, of course, everywhere across the world. And, speaking on the topic and speaking on the topic of like the local foreigner divide that we're seeing, like what are your thoughts on this, Maria, especially as, someone who has lived in Singapore, someone who in everything but name can be considered Singaporean. What are your thoughts on what's been going on recently?
Well, still feel it's very heavy upon appearance, unfortunately. Whether you like it or not, people are still going to have an idea. We like to have, like what you said, patterns, right, in the society, and we like to segment people
Hmm.
naturally. And it boils down like to, let's say, what if I have plastic surgery, how much can the immigration recognize me then? How much are we trying to find out about, you know, talk to the person and find out exactly what they are? Because it's so difficult these days because the lines are blurring more and more between where you're from, where you feel home, where your parents are from, and you could be a Thai lady growing up in South Africa, and then you're based in Canada, and then you grew up, you studied in Singapore, and all of that. But you only find out all these when you talk to a person, when you reach out. And actually, tropical countries are much easier to talk to people. If you live in a cold country, you cannot have the small water cooler conversation.
Interesting.
I think
I
I'd
hadn't
like to add
considered that.
something. So like there are some older people here as well. They just think that Chinese, because you're Chinese, right? You naturally be able to speak Mandarin. But the fact is, some people have, although their race says they are Chinese, they have never spoken a word of Mandarin. Then the aunties and uncles will be like, huh? what the hell? Like they
Right.
cannot compute. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think anyone who is seen to be outside of, let's say, accepted boundaries would be like, wait, what? No, they're clearly breaking some social rule, and therefore, all that judgment comes in. Yeah, it's how do we deal with it? I've taken an interest in this topic mostly because, as there has been a strong criticism of the presence of Indian citizens living in Singapore. And as an Indian citizen myself, I think I have been watching this with a fair bit of, I'll be honest, fear. So I've been trying to understand, like, where all of this is coming from. And on the one hand, I do understand a lot of the conversations around, the loss of jobs, the increasing, costs of living, housing unaffordability. These are huge, huge factors when it comes to whether a person feels at home in their own country, and I can completely understand and empathize. But at the same time, I'm also sensing a certain um, stereotyping, going on with respect to the hate. So, and I'm just curious if that is something that all foreigners here living in Singapore, or is it just me as, an Indian citizen?
So actually, can you answer this? Because at the top of my head, I actually have to say this is not only I feel that it happened to a couple of my Russian friends as well.
Right.
Something about like taxi. This is very funny. Like the guy would actually arrive to the block, and he sees that I'm standing there, and I like put my hand out, and he knows it's me. He just turns around and he drives away.
Wow.
And then and on the street, if you are like standing and there's like a local family that's flagging, he just completely misses me. He sees me, but he goes to the one further, which is like a local family. And this didn't just happen to me, it happened a couple of times with my Russian friends, and they were like, did you also have that experience? I'm like, yes, I did.
Wow.
um,
Okay.
so apartments as well, it's really hard to find homes. For me, the real estate was a pain in the
Yeah.
it was not easy to find homes because of the way they look at you. They ask you to do they give you a questionnaire like where do you work, what pass are you holding, how old are you, where are you from, what job, what tier, like they would just ask you, and I was like, great, and you have to answer me where, how many years experience is your real estate experience, why is the room available and all that. I asked them, what is your NRIC number? They were like, why are you asking me? I'm like, why are you asking me that? Like, you think it's okay to ask me that? I mean, it's like, if you want to find out, meet me, don't ask me this questionnaire and what race I am.
Yeah. No,
So,
I understand completely. This is something that I battle with also. And I think like, poof, acceptance rates are like 9% for me or something. It's a bit sucky. And I think one of the unfortunate things about Singapore is that the rental markets are not regulated. So it's all well and good to talk about like ethnic housing quotas and stuff, but that only applies to Singaporeans, and there is nothing in terms of rent in the private market. So what do you do? Oh gosh, I that's a tough experience, Maria. Like that's something that no one should
no,
go through, right?
it's an experience. It's fine. I'm experiencing new things in Bangkok as well, and I'm growing, and I realize that there are many issues everywhere,
Hmm.
and people are just people.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I wanted to talk a little bit about COVID and how it has changed things for you.
well, COVID has allowed me to school myself. I took an MBA while I was working, which was a very crazy experience. Yeah, it was really cool. That I also started writing. Like I was it was very productive for me. I started writing about belonging, and then I also realized that people are, because I moved countries, and I realized how different people do not talk about COVID here at all. They are just, we don't talk about COVID, and because there's just so many things happening on a daily basis that it's just not, like one of our friend has said, people are so self-absorbed. In 2009, when the war with Chechnya, 10-year war with Chechnya and Sri Lankan war had come to an end, people were talking about swine flu. Nobody noticed the war has come to an end. This is what our friend has said, and it's true. People were absorbed. They were scared not to die. There was swine flu. But how many men we have lost in the Chechnya war? all the young men, and when I was born, my class didn't have many boys in it because most of the young people were not having children, and men, we lost a lot of men, and many women went to Georgia or Turkey to find husbands.
Okay. Wow.
And so I'm saying that COVID is COVID, and it's unfortunate, but I have experienced a different side of it being here. Um, People do not talk much about it.
Okay.
And also, my algorithm changed when I was flying. I was looking at this specific app where the news app that we all use. The same article was actually differently. It was rephrased differently when I landed in the new country in Bangkok. The same article was phrased differently. The angle was different.
Interesting. I totally did
I
not
know
expect that. Everybody's favorite news app. No, I'm curious about the COVID experience because it has kind of exacerbated a lot of the anger and resentment that local Singaporeans have felt towards the presence of foreigners. Have you felt that change between, let's say, 2019 and 2020?
I feel like it was like a rolling ball that just kind of, it was the peak of people's frustrations, and I honestly feel very empathetic with my friends who are in Singapore, and I talk to them very often. And they are stressed, and it's really, the rules are really strict, and this is how it has to be because it's a very small, tight society. And of course, um, people are trying to comply, and it could be a side effect. But the good side effect that I saw with COVID in Singapore is I like that my local friends are moving out of their family homes. I
Oh,
love that. I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, do your own laundry.
Oh, interesting. I have been reading about this because of COVID. I think frustrations within the households are really high, and young people just want to move out for privacy and stuff. And I think it's a step in the right direction. But yeah, interesting point. Shanbang, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I mean that might anger some Singaporeans because they have never done laundry before. At least not on their own.
Key life skills, yo. No, thanks for that perspective, Maria. I guess so. This is a question that I try to ask, people in general. If you were a policymaker, Maria, so let's say you are the Prime Minister of Singapore, and you're currently, you know, right now it's 2021. You are the Prime Minister of Singapore. What would you do differently with respect to, assuaging the concerns and anger that people have over the presence of foreigners and integration in general?
Hmm. I do not think what Singapore is doing is wrong, though. I think that the government is really smart. To be really honest, they think about every single step. And I have thought about this kind of, every law that is being incorporated. I feel that it's very well and carefully weighed out. In terms of, well, I mean, Singapore has taken a lot of foreigners, let's put it this way. And it's not like a rubber band, and it cannot stretch. It's probably, maybe there must be an interest more, the way of filtering out who you choose to keep and who you need to lose. Um, I really don't know how to answer this, but I don't see that. Maybe we may not understand why the rationales behind a lot of things that the government does, but I do think it's a very smart one. And yeah, there are multiple reasons to why they do this. And because I have seen how things work in other countries, I am starting to piece it together and see why some things have to be done.
Yeah.
So I cannot answer this, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no. I think my answer is generally, that Singapore should buy out, Batam and Bintan, and that just opens up so much space. And Indonesia has like 72,000 islands or something, so what's losing to? But
Maybe Johor can become a part of Singapore.
Yeah, but then it's just harder to manage, like just having an island makes it easier, to maintain sovereign control. But and look, let's be real. Like Johor is already part of Singapore, right? In more ways than one. So,
Almost.
um, no, no, but
Build a hyperloop. Hyperloop.
yeah, I'm really hoping that that HSR project comes through. Even though I understand that they don't want to continue with it, but more connectivity is always a good thing, especially between Malaysia and Singapore. Which in my opinion are sister countries. So, um, yeah, that's there. But that aside, I think there is a larger conversation to be had around immigration policy across the world, as you pointed out, Maria, because every country has to do it differently. Every country does it differently. I mean, you have something like the United Arab Emirates, and I was just checking the stats today, where it's like 90% of the population are not local born. So I think they have their own unique set of issues that maybe Singapore can learn from. At the same time, being super closed, like let's say Japan, would also have its own iterant issues. So like, where's the middle ground? I think is something that everybody has to figure out. My honest opinion is that if Singapore could expand its land area, I think that would assuage some of the issues. Hence, the buying out of Batam and Bintan. But to be realistic, I don't think there is a good answer for that. So yeah. Shanbang, if you were a policymaker, what would you do differently?
That's a very big question. Um, I suppose I would allow more exchanges, at least visas, to more countries because I personally feel that Singaporeans themselves are not. Okay, so the thing is that we are always afraid of, oh, Singaporeans running away, right? They're not coming back. But I think that's a symptom of a problem. Uh, we're not looking to treat that. Like, why are we always scared of people running away when maybe there's more to the reason why people run away, if you're not providing good enough jobs, of course people don't want to stay. If it's stressful, people don't want to stay. So what's so bad about people running away? Um, of course, brain drain is a problem of its own, but I think that it can always okay. So the fact is that Singaporeans were always worried that, oh yeah, if foreigner comes in, foreigner gonna steal jobs, and I don't think it's something unique to Singapore, but it's because we are so much more smaller. That kind of voice become louder. Yeah, you might say that, oh, it's just a minority, right? But then we are already so small. Our minority isn't gonna become even smaller. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
The problem I feel is that um, Singaporeans need to have the opportunity to be able to explore more options overseas. Yeah, yeah.
So
I
as a
mean, at the same
policymaker,
time, at the same time, other countries can. I mean, it can be a reciprocal exchange. Like you go to my country, I come to your country. Like, I'm pretty sure back then, maybe 60s, 70s, it's a lot more open. People could immigrate easier. I would say today is a lot harder because you need to have the skill. That's one thing. Then you need to be able to speak the language. Because back then, you hear stories about people migrate, and let's say they have family members there, and then they have zero experience with the language. But that's okay, right? Then somehow or rather, they manage to become part of. They migrate and then they start learning about the country, and then afterwards, they become naturalized citizens. These days, you
um,
don't hear as much, right? Yeah.
yeah, but I don't know if immigration was easier back then. Also, right? I think rules have always been put in place. In fact, I think that the passport situations that we have right now is a fairly modern concept, and that has made things easier. Like I was read like so. Let's take the example of Singapore, right? So there has been a lot of rules and controls on immigration even during colonial times, right? So there was, I think, a more interesting example would be in 1933 when the colonial government banned all immigration from China because the local population was angry that Chinese people were taking over the island. And then they took a step further by banning all women from China entirely in 1938, to dissuade Chinese people from having families in the country. So these are things that have existed back then. So I would actually disagree with. I would actually say the opposite of what you said, Shanbang, in that immigration has actually become a lot more easier, more accessible, and more transparent in a way. But yeah, I mean, COVID, of course, has changed all of that.
I mean, it's okay. I would say you still require a higher set of skill level today than way back then. Um, the requirements are different today.
Right.
And
Right.
for example, let's say you cannot speak the local language, right? Last time that's fine because if they really need skill, if you have a certain skill like say welding, and they don't have enough people to do welding, they don't care if you can't speak. They're just gonna have you come on over anyway. Yeah. But these days, you need to be able to speak the language, and I think that's where it's different for Singapore because we don't have. If you can speak English, and then you have another skill, I think it's good enough for you to come over. I mean, provided that there is a need for such a skill here. But for other countries, you can't just say, "Oh, I know English." You need to be fluent in German, French, Spanish. Then they will consider you. And also the laws are a bit different in their own countries. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they would have to look at all available options in their own local countries before they just go, oh yeah, okay, you know what? We need to hire more people, and they might not be from our own country. Yeah.
Right. So, Shanbang, as a policymaker, what you want to do is ease the process, right? Make it easier for Singaporeans to go to other countries and do jobs there. Perhaps have a free trade agreement with a clause for a certain list of jobs.
And I think we can open up to also more countries because I don't think we have much with places like Africa. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
We're not well exposed to Africa, for example.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting that you say that, right? Because, I mean, as a Singaporean passport holder, you do have, the highest freedom of travel and, the most access as compared to everybody else.
As a tourist, that's
Right.
yeah, tourism. But then
Okay.
immigration, that's a different story, right? If you're
Yeah.
American, you have the ability to get dual citizenship, and then you can also easily work in so many places, without even applying for a work visa. So you see, that's where it's different. Yeah, we might
Right.
have the best passport to travel, but you're not gonna go to say Botswana. Like how many Singaporeans go there? Not that it's not a place you shouldn't visit, but it's just you have so many countries you can go to, but you're not gonna go every single one of them in general for most people.
Yeah, it's actually it takes a lot for a person to leave their life. Even if I told you now that I'm gonna give you a scholarship or um, an awesome deal, it's very unlikely you're gonna pack your things and you're gonna leave your family and friends behind and go and pursue that life. And that goes not just for Singaporeans, but anyone that is traveling out of their home country. And then you are it makes you stronger, and you come with a certain set of, I would say, skills that are non-tangible, but they are survival skills. Um, it's kind of interesting that not many people, if given the chance, would want to migrate, would want to leave their loved ones behind. So I think it boils down to priorities. Where do you want, what do you want for yourself? Do you want to be in the comfort zone, or do you want to learn something new? Do you want to learn about culture or interrogate your comfort zone? There's many, it's about priorities, but I'm grateful that my mom brought me out of Russia, and it must have been also hard for her, to be honest. I cannot imagine if I had a kid now to go somewhere new.
Yeah. No. No, I absolutely agree with you. I personally generally recommend everyone to at least try living in another country. I think it's always a character building experience, and if an opportunity like that comes up, I would suggest everyone take it. But also, as you pointed out, Maria, I think it also depends on priorities, and it may not necessarily be a comfort zone, but it's also about there are certain things that certain people are possibly not interested in. It's like I think a good example would be my friends back in India, some of whom have gone on to become activists and journalists. So it's not like they don't want to like live overseas. It's just that these things take up so much more time. So so it's a question of priorities, as you pointed out, Maria. So thanks for that. Does anyone have any other topics that you would like to cover as part of this? Because I think I've pretty much covered what I needed to talk about and get more insight from you guys.
I'm okay.
All right. Okay. All right. So if there is nothing else, I'd probably ask you, Maria, to tell us a little bit about your life in Bangkok now. What are you doing, and what's going on?
Well, I'm doing the same thing I was doing in Singapore, but the kind of job, there's kind of like different markets now, and Singapore is one of them. But I'm also kind of shift to my own business, and I'm trying to do that full time. I'm trying to do freelance full time, to be honest, just because of, I studied some things and I learned, and I have something I want to do for the society. So I think my life has been pretty interesting because every day something happens in Bangkok. It does not necessarily mean a good thing.
Okay.
Life is very vibrant here, and if you're ever feeling bored, you can try opening a Thai bank account. If you feel like your life is boring and is mundane, you can open a Thai bank account, and you will have hundreds of things to do. If you're an immigrant, apparently you cannot make overseas transfers, and I had to take out my Thai baht like a freaking Santa Claus and carry it across the soy dogs, and so that I can put it into the other bank. And that was quite. I was calling my friend like, I'm carrying this. I put them all in the bag. I withdrew all of them.
Oh
Because
gosh.
you can't. It was like during the Mongolian invasion.
Wow.
Some stuff like that. There are things, because you actually can do it through an app, but you can't do it because it's not written anywhere. If you're an immigrant, you can't really make these transfers. You either have to come to the bank or you have to withdraw it and go to the branch. And then what else? I think this is Thai people are very warm, and they are warriors. They have never been colonized.
Yeah. So
And actually, life there is as interesting as I always say. Life, you look at the alphabets of each country, that's how the life there will be. It's always interesting. The alphabets are, it's life is.
oh right, like the
I
shape
know
of the
how you
alphabet.
interpret
Right.
it.
Okay. Gotcha.
The alphabets,
Yeah,
yeah,
gotcha.
the language. Look at the language; it says everything, even if you can't read it.
Okay, interesting. No, I'm super glad that you are finding your new life in Thailand super interesting. And once again, I want to thank you for being part of this. Shanbang, as always, until the next podcast
Yeah,
episode.
thanks for having me.
Yeah. So yeah,
Thank you for
yeah.
having us.
So all right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed listening to the episode. And with that, Maria, Shanbang, see you around, and everyone, bye bye.